Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Former President Trump has ignited a political firestorm by claiming that he'll be arrested this week. He's under investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for alleged hush money payments during the 2016 presidential campaign.
The investigation has been called a weaponizing of the prosecutor's office for political purposes. It's also building sympathy for Trump, and it could have an impact on the 2024 presidential election. Mark Martin explains.
Trump's claim that he could be arrested even has potential presidential opponents speaking up on his behalf.
It just feels like a politically charged prosecution here. And I, for my part, just feel like it's just not what the American people want to see.
Trump also called for protests, but so far the response is muted.
I don't think people should protest this, no.
I believe that people understand that if they give voice to this, if this occurs on Tuesday, that they need to do so peacefully and in a lawful manner.
Trump's claim involves the Manhattan DA's investigation into an alleged hush money payment prior to the 2016 election to adult film star Stormy Daniels over an affair. Trump has denied the affair. A Trump spokesperson later issued a statement clarifying that the DA provided no notification on the arrest. Manhattan's District Attorney Alvin Bragg has been building a case and says he will not be intimidated. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren declared on ABC's This Week that Trump is not immune from prosecution.
No one is above the law, not even the former president of the United States. If it's time to bring indictments, then they'll bring indictments. That's how our legal system works.
Attorney and law professor Alan Dershowitz, a Trump opponent, called the case a weaponizing of the prosecutor's office for political purposes. New Hampshire Republican Governor Chris Sununu, who is considering running for the GOP presidential nomination, said the potential indictment is generating sympathy for Trump.
This is likely some sort of misdemeanor on an issue 7 years ago. I just think that the not just the media, but really a lot of the Democrats have misplayed this in terms of building sympathy for the former president, and it does drastically change the paradigm as we go into the 24 election.
Still, the former president's attorney told CNBC that if indicted, Trump will surrender to face criminal charges. Meanwhile, House Speaker McCarthy will ask Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan to investigate whether Bragg is using federal funds in his investigation. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody joins us now from our Washington bureau. So, David, it seems amazing. Trump can dominate the headlines just with a single statement. So he came out with this even though the DA has not announced a charge or an arrest date. Why did he make the announcement?
Well, I think there's a sense that he wanted to get ahead of this, for sure, and start to craft the narrative that this is, once again, another witch hunt. And while he has said that before, Gordon, I think clearly time is of the essence here because he thinks it will be coming down this week. Of course, now the Trump campaign, I said, well, it is the Trump campaign, kind of backing off a little bit as to whether or not it will actually be Tuesday. But they believe they do have some intel that it will be coming. And so I think that's part of it here. But Gordon, look, all along, we keep talking witch hunt, witch hunt. I say we keep. He does. He talks witch hunt, whether it be Russia or the Ukraine phone call and just go down the list. And here we are again. I mean, they're going to go after Trump on this. You would think there might be a few other things they would want to go on him or for him on. And yet at the same time, that may happen in the future. But on this specifically, something the FEC themselves decided not to go after him on federal election campaign violations. They said they weren't going to do it. And here we are 7 years later, and this is what they're going after him for? It just plays right into Trump's hands.
Well, the Manhattan DA's office has already, I mean, they've had two prosecutors resign. The previous head of it said we're not going to move forward. So you look at this case and go, why isn't the John Edwards case precedent? That there was a grand jury in North Carolina that indicted him, and then a real jury of his peers said not guilty on one count, mistrial on the others, and the whole case was dropped. So I don't see why that isn't a precedent here. If you're not going to hold John Edwards responsible, why in the world would you go for Trump on this one?
Well, that's exactly right. And there are a lot of similarities between the two. We're not going to go all the way back to John Edwards and relitigate that case, but there was a deadlock and there was, in essence, a mistrial and nothing else was done about it. And that was, like you say, John Edwards. And, you know, this is very much the same situation. I mean, it really gets down to, here's the problem. The problem is how you're going to have to prove intent to defraud, in essence. And that is going to be very, very difficult because Donald Trump, for the most part, doesn't keep emails or texts. He just doesn't do it. And so you're not going to have that paper trail necessarily in this specific case, and that's going to be a big problem.
Well, let's talk about the other cases because I think they're actually more important. Evan Corcoran, who's a sort of a high-powered lawyer, I mean, he's Princeton, Georgetown graduate, worked at one of the top firms, part of this hedge fund. He's now being forced to testify. He's Trump's attorney. And a federal judge says that you can go through the attorney-client privilege because there's proof of some kind of underlying crime. So how serious is that case? That's the document case from Mar-a-Lago.
Well, it's extremely serious, Gordon. I mean, this is federal prosecutor Jack Smith looking at potential obstruction of justice charges against Donald Trump. And you're right, when it comes, and you know this, Gordon, obviously being a lawyer, to actually take or punch through on attorney-client privileges and be able to actually have an attorney testify on this crime fraud exception is rare. And that clearly, what that means, in essence, is that they believe, the prosecutors, Jack Smith and others, potentially think that there was some sort of crime committed in the discussions between Trump and the communications between Trump and his lawyer here, Evan Corcoran. So I think that's the issue here. And because the judge believed that there seems to be evidence to that effect, that's why it's so important. And that seems to be the big enchilada in all of these cases, though there are some other cases as well.
Well, let's look at one more, and that's Georgia. And the charge there would be election interference. How serious do you think that is, and is that likely to go to indictment?
That also feels relatively likely that it could indeed go to indictment. They're actually looking at potential racketeering charges, some sort of criminal espionage, that Donald Trump and others were in essence kind of mafia-ish, kind of behind a whole scheme to overturn the election in 2020 by contacting Georgia officials. Once again, look, I think we need to take a step back for a moment here. You're looking at, this has never been done in history, a former president of the United States being indicted for anything, whether it be the Stormy Daniels situation, the Georgia election, the obstruction of justice. No, this has never happened before. Donald Trump is right now the leader in the polls in 2024 as an announced candidate for president of the United States. This is the issue. This is why the politicization, if you will, rings true to a lot of ordinary Americans. And I've got to tell you, Gordon, what it was interesting to me, and to use politics for a second here, the Senate Republicans, for the most part, don't want anything to do with Trump. The Senate Republicans don't. But the House GOP does. The House GOP has been backing Trump. Why is that? Well, because if you think about America, you know how we have those maps, right? Well, the Senate map is very much blue and red both, of an even split. But if you look at the districts all around the country, you see that other map, it's very much red in most of the country. That's the disconnect here. That's why the House GOP is backing Trump, because they know that most of those rural counties and most of the other situations around the country are in Trump's corner on this one.
All right. Well, David, thank you for your insights. And for people watching at home, I want to give you just a little insight in some of these charges. Whenever you see the charge conspiracy, what the prosecution is saying is we don't have an actual crime, but you were talking about a crime. So in the talking about the crime, you never said, well, I don't want to do that. You just, you talked about doing a crime. Obstruction of justice is one of the hardest ones. I really don't understand it, but prosecutors have a broad array of weapons to throw at people. And this one is, well, there was an underlying crime, but we're not going to charge you on that, or we didn't find it. But what we did find is you stopped us from looking at it. So that's what obstruction of justice means. Racketeering is a whole nother thing. It was designed against the mafia. To hear racketeering and what happened in Georgia really just sends a shiver down my spine, because they use electronic communications in the furtherance of some kind of conspiracy. All of this, it sounds really bad, but when you get underneath it, is there a there? And is that something that a former president should be indicted on? Well, in other news, buyers are offering to take over 2 troubled banks to help avert a global banking crisis. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. Here in the United States, New York Community Bank agreed to buy the failing Signature Bank for $2 billion. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, the investment bank UBS is ready to buy its struggling competitor, Credit Suisse. The Swiss government brokered the $3 billion deal. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen predict the move will bring financial stability and protect the global economy. Meanwhile, the Fed is conducting an internal investigation over its failure to take action with Silicon Valley Bank, despite being aware of risky practices. Now to the war in Ukraine. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is in Russia today. Xi landing in Moscow earlier this morning for a 3-day visit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two nations describing the trip as an opportunity to deepen their relationship. China, which depends on Russia as a source of oil and gas, has supported Russia in its war on Ukraine. The two leaders are expected to discuss the invasion and Moscow's goals today. The trip comes just days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin on charges of war crimes in Ukraine. Well, on Sunday, a Palestinian terrorist opened fire on a family in the town of Huwara in the West Bank. Despite being hit, the father, a former Marine and American citizen, shot and wounded the attacker. No one else, fortunately, was injured. The attack came just days before the Islamic holy month of Ramadan that begins on March 22nd. The celebration has, in the past, sparked an increase in terror attacks. Israel's police commissioner said security forces are prepared to ensure freedom of worship for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Passover and Easter also fall during the month of Ramadan. And with the month of Ramadan and the religious calendars all converging, approaching, CBN will be holding a live prayer event for peace in Israel tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell will be leading in the prayer. You can watch it on the CBN News YouTube channel and, of course, the CBN News app. Now to Turkey and the ongoing humanitarian crisis after February's earthquakes. CBN's Dan Rainey is in Hatay to show us how CBN's Operation Blessing is providing clean water and food for some victims who've been overlooked.
Operation Blessing is here in Hatay, Turkey, in a small community that's really been underserved. The people we talked to said they've hardly gotten any help here at all.
Before you came, we were all alone. We didn't have anything, no water or food.
With all the broken pipes, if you can find water here, it's going to be contaminated. So one of the first things Operation Blessing did was set up a water filtration system and a large set of tanks, big enough to serve this entire community. Now we're doing a food distribution, and people here are getting rice, beans, sugar, a lot of staples for their family. It's all coming from a warehouse where thousands of boxes of food have gone out to the people that need it the most. And everyone we talk to is extremely appreciative for the help.
We are so grateful for your help. Now we have good water and food to eat. Thank you.
Thanks to the support of Operation Blessing donors, people here in Hatay are getting what they need right when they need it the most.
So many grateful faces. Gordon, back to you.
What they need when they need it most. We want to be there for people in time of need, and we're doing it in your name. If you've already given to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, thank you for that. That's your gift at work in Turkey today, helping people recover from this earthquake. If you haven't given, I invite you to do it right now. It's real simple. Just pick up the phone and call us. 1-800-700-7000. Just say, I want to give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of a check, or you can text If you want to do it the new way, you can text OBDR to 71777. Either way, do it right now. Help the people in need in Turkey.